the why, I think, is so important to get to eventually. You know, leave it up to the investigators to figure out the how and the who. I think one of the things that struck me as I listened to more and more about the background, particularly of Tamerlan, he reminds me a little bit of the Columbine high schoolers. There is an anger, and the anger finds a focus. Is anger at the feeling of isolation a major component to what we're calling self-radicalization?
There's no doubt that at the end, the final step is a separation where they get pulled into this violence. But what we're forgetting is this is the tip of the iceberg. How many incidents do we need, like Faisal Shahzad, the Times Square bomber, or Nidal Hassan, to realize that the isolationism is a final step of a pathway of radicalization that begins with an ideology? These terrorists are a tip of the iceberg of a global conflict between political Islam and the Islamic State, the dominance that grabs the dreams of Islamic youth and tells them that the better society is one based on the Islamic State, the Quran as constitution, Sharia as law. And we see that oppressing hundreds of millions under Iran, Saudi Arabia, the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, on, versus the dreams of secular liberalism, of muscular liberalism that we need, as Prime Minister Cameron, after the 7/7 bombing, said, you know, we've been ignoring the battle for the soul of Islam globally, internally, within the youth, and between societies, between the West and the East, or Islamic dominance, that is. And we have to play offense instead of defense.
So what would you all say when you are looking at how do we identify? I mean, here are two men who were able to do quite a bit of damage. As far as we can tell, they're not acting at the direction of anything, but certainly under the influence of either the internet or maybe something happened in Russia when Tamerlan was over there. How do we go about identifying them, or should it be about prevention?
I think we really have to ask, why is it that some young people are vulnerable to that narrative? I mean, there has to be something about the individual that he or she...
And what is it? Do you have a theory?
I think that when we see people who are more or less self-radicalizing, and it may involve a trip abroad that may be part of the radicalization process, but they're choosing to identify more with the global jihadi movement than to identify with their neighbors. And I think there is a personal vulnerability when we see this kind of radicalization in the West.
I think that's exactly right, that these are individuals who are engaging in these type of violent behaviors because they are radicalizing on their own. And I think the key to really getting and stopping that is that law enforcement, particularly on the local level, needs to partner with local communities, particularly vulnerable communities, so that there is a partnership whereby the local imams, religious leaders, and others are really preaching a message of inclusion, of peace, that really undercuts the terrorist narrative, that you are isolated, you're not part of the Western society, and therefore you need to become a violent extremist. And that type of partnership really prevents, from the very beginning, on a community level, a lot of these types of violent behaviors.
I think those kind of partnerships are very important. When we look at it from a law enforcement perspective, it's not clear to me, though, that there was some sort of sign that could have prevented this. I mean, that'll absolutely be investigated, as it should be. There's already discussion as to whether or not there was an intelligence failure here, given that Russia warned the U.S. back in 2011. I went through and did a very comprehensive look at the timeline of Tamerlan's radicalization. I think there are signs in 2011 that he did have or was starting to adopt an extremist ideology. But at the same time, an extremist ideology isn't the same as a propensity to act and undertake violence. And we have lots of people in the U.S. who subscribe to a variety of extreme ideologies. They're not all under surveillance, nor should they be.
Not necessarily militant. They're not necessarily thinking that the ends justify blowing up people at a marathon.
Right. And we neither have the resources to conduct surveillance on every one of them, nor in an open society would we want to. So that's, I think, part of the question when we look back and look at his radicalization, the fact that extremism and propensity for violence are two different things, although obviously they're correlated.
And I think one of the things I would disagree with Sohail on is that we've had a failure of leadership in our Muslim community, because one of the problems is the narrative. And the narrative is imbalanced in that many of the leadership in our community says, oh, there's no problem, these guys weren't even really Muslim, and we don't really have, and the narrative is all about victimization, America's bigots, America's anti-Muslim, anti-Islam, they're killing Muslims abroad, they're in Muslim lands. This narrative is not balanced by other Muslim leaders, the reformists that are anti-Islamists, that believe in American liberty, and that imbalance creates a narrative that makes them feel that this society is not theirs, that they're visitors. And I'm not saying they shouldn't have free speech, but we have not had a balanced narrative from the pulpit. Many of the imams come out of the Muslim Brotherhood legacy ideology in America, and they have not allowed us to have diverse ideas protecting and defending America.
And yet we did see in the very early days when it was learned that these men had attended a mosque, a woman came out, a spokesman for the mosque, and said, we saw no signs of this. Had we seen any signs of this, we would have called the police. So we do see, you know, the face of Islam that is, you know, obviously the bulk of those who practice it. So the question is, you know, there's a fine line between a community in which you reach out and a community you're spying on. And it seems to me that if you spy on and you're always in there going, who's doing what, that you create a distance for those folks who might otherwise help you. They begin to feel attacked.
That's why, Candy, the key thing is a partnership. And rather than trying to create a mentality of siege or a suspicion for an entire faith community, there's over 6 million peaceful American Muslims in the country, you want to create a feeling of partnership and inclusion whereby, and the facts bear this out, whereby you see in the last 10 years, nearly half of foiled terrorist plots have been foiled with the help of the Muslim American community, giving the law enforcement folks tips, or you saw the Christmas Day bomber, for example, where the father called law enforcement and said, hey, my son might be engaged in violent extremism, something needs to be done.
Well, we have...
I want to sort of switch it up a little and just ask you, you know, the younger brother is an American citizen. And I wonder if enough is being done to bring in those who have come from other countries to make them feel a part of the American fabric. Are there too many, here's this community, here's this community, here's this community?
I want to say a couple of things. The first is, with respect to the younger brother, the two of them seem to have followed very different radicalization trajectories. When we look at Tamerlan, his radicalization trajectory seems to be very ideological in nature, but not all radicalization is ideological. The younger brother was a pot smoker, a drinker, a partier, a womanizer. He does not seem to have subscribed
to... He had friends, he seemed to fit in.
Well, both of them had friends. I mean, Tamerlan, if you look at him, he was actually fit in quite well as a boxer. He was extremely flamboyant, you know, wearing furs, leather pants, silk scarves, things like that. He went through a tremendous change. It seems they had two different radicalization trajectories, but I certainly, in this case, wouldn't blame the U.S. for not doing enough to assimilate its immigrants. I mean, there's no signs that these guys were assimilation failures. And if you compare immigrants in the United States to European countries, I just got back from a fellowship in Europe, they're much more well assimilated. There are exceptions, like the Somali community in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and there are a few other areas of ethnic enclaves. But I would not blame the U.S. For not doing enough to make them feel welcome.
Jessica, let me bring you in on this. When you look at the totality of what you know right now about these two young men, were they impossible to spot? If, from a law enforcement point of view, because you certainly were on, you know, that side in the Clinton administration, is there just not anything that is obvious that could have stopped this?
Well, I do think that part of the issue, of course, as my colleagues have said, is that the Muslim community is the key. However, they were not radicalized in a mosque. They weren't displaying symptoms of radicalization in the mosque. They seem to have been much more active on the internet. We don't yet know exactly what happened in Dagestan, but it's very hard if somebody's doing this radicalization on their own on the internet for others to notice. So it is a problem. And
but they were displaying radicalization in the mosque, though. I mean, that's
well,
one thing that Tamerlan was doing.
Not enough that the
outbursts about Martin Luther King and the like.
But you can't report everybody that has an outburst.
Absolutely.
I mean,
there's a difference between, as I said, between violence and radicalization. But they certainly did display signs of extremism in the mosque.
What you're discussing is the final steps of the violent outburst, the beginning steps of this mentality. And I, as an American Muslim, you know, I have 3 children, and I hope that they can embrace American liberty. That's why we have a Muslim Liberty Project that looks at promoting these ideas of American patriotism and nationalism versus this Islamo-patriotism or Islamo-nationalism that's global, part of the global ummah, jihad. We have to counter those ideas early on, and I think we need to hold accountable our Muslim leadership about these things, because the solution, if it's going to happen, is going to come from within our faith community. The problem is not the violence. That's just the symptom. The deeper problem is the ideological drift.
I'm going to have to stop it there, and I'm really sorry. I hope you all will come back, because I think the why is always so important, to see what we can do and how to spot what's going on when you've got somebody troubled in your midst. Thank you so much.